Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are plunging into something pretty fascinating, the incredible, sometimes even dangerous power of stories.
Yeah, we're looking at what some sources call the Hollywood effect.
Right, that magnetic force that makes us believe fiction, sometimes even when, we consciously know it's not real.
Exactly. Our deep dive today is really built around this huge contrast. We're digging into sources that compare dramatic fiction, kurgu as some call it, with the power of genuine lived truth, or hakikat.
And the mission, I guess, is to figure out why. Why are we so willing to just drop our critical defenses for a good story?
And what's the real difference between just being entertained for a bit and being genuinely transformed by something you encounter?
One thing that really hit me from the research was how it defined a film's actual value. It wasn't about box office or reviews, none of that.
What was it then?
They called it the delta. Basically the difference between you before you watched it and you after.
Ah, so the change it creates in you. Your mood, maybe how you see things, your horizon, as they put it.
Exactly. That shift is the value. It treats the story as a tool for change, not just, killing time.
And that connects directly to this Hollywood effect idea. Some stories don't just affect us temporarily. They actually convert us in some way.
They change us.
Right. And the mechanism seems to be about getting past our internal security systems, our skepticism.
Okay, so let's unpack that. We looked at Dan Mayer's analysis. He's a business strategist, interestingly, not a filmmaker.
Right.
And he talks about how if you deliver serious information dryly, like a memo, people put up walls, logic barriers, skepticism.
Oh,
They start questioning it. Is this right? What's the angle?
that's just the brain's default, isn't it? Filtering raw data.
But Mayer says the quickest way, the most efficient way to get belief is through drama. Drama somehow lowers those barriers.
Yeah, that corporate analogy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Written company values might take, 10, 15 years to really sink into the culture?
A long time.
But if you dramatize them, tell a story about a manager being heroic, living those values. He claimed it cuts the time down to maybe 3 years.
Wow. So story is just efficiency, faster buy-in.
Which is powerful, but like you said, maybe a bit cynical too. The goal isn't necessarily truth, maybe just faster compliance.
Well, and this power, this sort of emotional end run around logic, it's not new. It goes way back.
Oh yeah, to the absolute birth of cinema. Think about that 1895 screening in Paris, or 1897 in Istanbul, Arrival of a Train.
The Lumiere brothers film, the train coming right at the camera.
We see it now and think, okay, cool old film. But back then, people apparently freaked out, screaming, diving for cover.
They genuinely thought a real train was about to crash through the screen. That raw, immediate reaction to visual drama.
Before sound, before effects, just movement. It shows how deeply wired we are for this stuff. And people started figuring out how to harness it, like Stanislavski.
Ah, Konstantin Stanislavski. The Russian theater director, late 1800s, he totally changed acting.
His big idea, psychorealistic acting. He famously said, acting is not playing, but living.
Which is the seed of method acting, right? Actors trying to genuinely feel the character's emotions, not just fake them. Daniel Day-Lewis is maybe the most famous example.
And the goal shifted. It wasn't just about the actor's performance anymore. Frank Capra, the director, nailed it. He said, drama isn't when the actor cries.
It's when the audience cries.
Exactly. The whole point became manufacturing real emotion in the viewer.
And sometimes that manufacturing process spills out of the theater with really tragic results. Which brings us, unfortunately, to Fargo.
The 1996 Coen Brothers movie, huge hit, low-budget success story.
But its weird legacy comes down to those first few seconds, that text on screen. This is a true story.
Which, as the Coens admitted later, was a complete lie. The whole plot, kidnapping, wood chipper, all of it totally made up.
They just put it there to make the audience lean in, believe it more readily, to lower those defenses right from the start.
And boy, did it work. It led to this really sad urban legend about Kumiko, a woman from Japan.
Right, the story goes, she saw Fargo, believed the scene where the character buries the ransom money by a fence marked with a little red snow globe.
A snow scraper, right?
Snow scraper, right. And she believed it was real money, still buried out there. So she flew to Minnesota to find it.
It's just heartbreaking, the power of one fictional detail. She traveled across the world for it.
And the reality was grim. She was found dead a few days later, frozen in the snow in North Dakota, actually. Not dressed for the terrible cold.
And her death officially. Suicide by freezing. Just an awful tragic end driven by a cinematic lie.
But wait, because there's another layer here, another twist, really powered by the Hollywood effect itself.
Oh.
Years later, in 2014, a documentary looked into her story. And it suggested that the whole narrative of her searching for Fargo's treasure, that itself might have been exaggerated, maybe even manufactured by the media, by Hollywood, because it made a better story.
You're kidding. So the story about the story was also adjusted.
Possibly. The documentary suggested her death was more likely linked to personal heartbreak, maybe mental health issues leading to suicide. But the world preferred the romantic, tragic narrative of a treasure hunt gone wrong.
So, like our sources put it, the Kurgu, the dramatic story, was just more appealing than the messy, painful hakikat, the truth. Wow.
It really shows how deep this goes. And psychology actually has terms for why this happens in our brains.
Like narrative transportation.
Exactly. When a story really pulls you in, your frontal lobe, the logical, analytical part, it kind of quiets down. And the limbic system, the emotional core, takes charge. Your brain's reality filter gets, well, disabled for a bit.
And don't mirror neurons play a part too? Like, we feel what the character feels.
Yes. We physically experience empathy. A character's pain, their joy, our brain fires as if it's happening to us. So a really good story doesn't just entertain, it temporarily rewrites our reality. It leaves an emotional imprint that feels almost like a real memory.
A false memory created by fiction.
Pretty much. Psychologist Pamela Rutledge pointed out that this process basically shuts down critical thinking circuits. And the stronger the emotion, fear, hope, anger, the more vulnerable we become. We're running on feelings, not facts.
And that vulnerability isn't just individual, right? It scales up socially. Which makes me think of that famous experiment, Asch.
Solomon Asch's conformity experiment from 1951. Yeah, classic social psychology.
Remind us how it worked.
Simple setup. You show people two cards. One has a line, the other has 3 lines of different lengths. They just have to say which of the 3 matches the first line. The answer is usually really obvious.
Okay, easy enough.
But everyone else in the room, except for the one real participant, is an actor. And they're all instructed to give the same wrong answer.
Ah, the pressure. So what happened?
The results were, frankly, kind of disturbing. About a third, 32% of the real participants knowingly gave the wrong answer just to go along with the group.
Even when they could clearly see the right answer.
Even then, they chose fitting in, social comfort, over undeniable, visible truth.
And today, those 7 actors in the room, they're replaced by the digital crowd, aren't they? The Twitter trends, the Facebook likes, the viral videos.
Exactly. Information, true or false, gets repeated and amplified by what looks like a majority. It creates this illusion of truth by repetition. If everyone seems to believe it, it starts to feel true, even if it isn't.
Which really makes you ask, who doesn't bend to that pressure? Who can actually resist the crowd?
That's the critical question. It brings us back to Stanislavski's living the role versus actually being the truth. A fundamental difference.
We talked about actors living the role, trying to generate authentic emotion for the audience.
But the sources we looked at argue that truly transformative figures throughout history, prophets, spiritual leaders, they weren't playing a role. They were the truth. Their message wasn't a performance. It was their entire existence. It didn't stop when the show was over.
They were fundamentally non-conformists then, immune to that Asch effect.
Completely. They stood alone for truth, whatever the cost.
Yeah.
And the sources identify specific qualities that underpin this absolute conviction. Think of them as the ultimate defense against manipulation, whether from a story or a crowd.
Yeah, I found these qualities really clarifying. The first one was sung, truthfulness.
It's more than just not lying, right?
Right. It means their words were totally pure. No taint of personal gain, no fear influencing what they said, no anger twisting it, just the unvarnished truth.
That lack of self-interest is key. It bypasses our skepticism. The second quality was ismet, sinlessness or innocence.
Meaning their personal flaws or desires didn't compromise the message, no hypocrisy.
Exactly. The message remained pure because the messenger lived with integrity. And the third, maybe the most crucial, temsil, the living example.
They didn't just talk the talk.
They walked the walk, 100%. They fully embodied everything they taught. That consistency was the proof. Like the example of Muhammad, peace be upon him, being called Il-Imi, the trustworthy, by everyone, even his opponents, long before his prophethood.
So character came first. That was the foundation.
Absolutely. And they weren't just, passively good people. The sources call them active goodness activists. They actively confronted injustice, challenged corrupt power, fought oppression.
And they paid the price, didn't they? Imprisonment, exile, worse. They chose truth over comfort every time.
Which provides a different kind of role model. Not a fictional hero, but a real one whose life is the message. Think of Mary standing alone with her child, facing accusations but holding on to her truth.
Or Abraham challenging his whole society's idols, even facing the fire. These aren't just stories, they're accounts of profound nonconformity for the sake of hakikat, of truth.
So when we pull all this together, what's the synthesis?
Well, it seems like the Hollywood effect is incredibly potent because Kruger fiction is basically optimized for our emotions. It slips past our logic.
It compels through feeling, using techniques honed over decades. But the ultimate power, the kind that genuinely changes lives and civilizations across centuries, that seems to come only from hakikat. Truth lived with total authenticity.
Yeah, fiction might transform you for the duration of the movie, maybe leave an emotional echo. But lived truth, embodied truth that can transform your whole life, your whole worldview.
And bringing it back to you, the listener, you're basically that eighth person in the Asch experiment every day, aren't you?
Wow, yeah. Every social media feed, every news cycle, every advert. It's a crowd showing you lines, telling you which one to pick, which story to believe.
The pressure is constant.
So we started with Frank Capra, thinking a story's value is if it makes the audience cry. Emotional impact.
But maybe the deeper value, the true measure of any narrative, whether it's a film or a life lived, isn't just about outward emotion. Maybe it's whether it makes you turn inward.
Makes you reflect, makes you question.
Exactly. So the final thought to leave you with is this. Are you living the comfortable story the crowd agrees on? Or are you trying to figure out, and maybe even live, the challenging, often costly path of truth?